20 people in your living room, it's massive, and they're listening to you. If you go to a comedy club, let's say that's 100 people for a small to medium-sized comedy club, and they're all listening to you. And as you grow, like 150 people is a lot of people, and they're coming back for exclusively to listen to your voice for 20, 30 minutes. That's significant.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Podcast for Podcasters podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Latham, and today we have with us Peter Martin, the host of 4 separate podcasts. How are you doing today, Peter?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, very well. So to start with, it would be good just to hear about why you started your first podcast, which one was your first, and how the podcasting journey kind of got going.
The first one I started was called Velocipodcast. I actually retired that about 1.5 years or maybe 2 years ago. I started podcasting. I used to do a lot of blogging, and something came to my attention. I would do movie reviews. Like I did a lot of Kung Fu 1970s reviews, basically just making fun of them. And then I would do some like Japanese, those really cheap slasher movies and stuff. And they're all just very silly. And I would take images, still images, and I used some JavaScript. If you rolled your mouse over it, it would flip the image. I put a joke in each one. And when I talked to my friends about those, they say, "Oh, I really like your movie reviews," but then they only ever looked at the pictures. So I was writing like a 1, 2, 3 page essay, and they just weren't reading it. And then I did video games journalism for a bit, and you could tell people read the first paragraph. So I realized, like, on the internet, people are not reading. But then why am I putting all this effort into this massive amount of content? If I write 5 pages and they read the first paragraph, there's no point. And that's where podcasting sort of became appealing, because if I record 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, people are going to listen to the whole thing. It's not guaranteed, but that's the idea. If you're going to start a podcast, you're usually going to finish the podcast or put more effort into listening to the whole thing. So that's why I started. And I started out with this thing called Velocipodcast, and it was just really random topics. And it was just to see if I could do it, because I had to teach, like, I didn't know about how to set up RSS feeds or put it on Apple Podcasts or all those other things. So it was a self-education project. And my first podcast, it was 5 minutes long. I just did 5 minutes every week, and then they just grew naturally as I got more comfortable speaking.
And have you found that podcasts have given you more engagement than blogs and sort of written content?
It would depend what you call engagement. So if you talk about like views and listens, it's way, way down, but then you can't account for bots. So that's always the first problem. So when you write a blog, you get 30,000 views or hits or whatever, but for all you know, 97% of that is bots and not actually people. So Ninja News Japan is probably my most popular of the podcasts I make. It has sort of a core audience of 800 people. Over X amount of days, like 2-3 weeks, it'll get 800 downloads. So in my mind, but the engagement I get from those 800 people is way more than I would have gotten from 10,000 people who viewed a blog post. So I would say the engagement of the individual is higher, but the number of individuals is lower, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. So people in the show are more invested in it.
Yeah, but that's what I want. I would rather have a smaller group of more invested people who actually want to talk about this stuff and make fun of the stuff or joke around, than people who just like listen to it or read it and move on.
Yeah, engagement is such an important thing. So how did you find or build that sort of core listener group of 800 people?
I have no idea. The skills I do have, one of the ones I do not have is self-promotion. I literally today was recording a podcast, and I decided, I promoted some other podcasts that I really like. I was like, I should mention my own. Like, that was an afterthought. And so it's just not something I do naturally. I don't ever say like, I've never said like and subscribe, or I've never said like, tell a friend. And I'm like, I should, but I just never do, because it's just not natural to me. So that is, I would say, my biggest failing. So Ninja News Japan, how it came to grow to the point it did, I have no idea. I honestly don't. I mean, I use Twitter and I post things on Twitter, and I have Facebook, I post things on Facebook, but at the end of the day, I don't know.
And what kind of content are you posting on Twitter and Facebook? Is that clips from your show?
Twitter is usually just like a link to the YouTube video. Facebook is a Facebook page, like it's a Ninja News Japan group. So, but again, it's just links to the Facebook or to the audio or the video. The TikTok's pretty good. So I take clips from the podcast and put it on TikTok. And that seemed very natural, because it's some of the stuff I do is very clip oriented anyway. So just instead of having one big thing, just cut it up into pieces and put it on theirs. And that's been up and down. Okay. I think I got shadow banned once.
Oh, really?
Well, I went from probably like 600-700 views per video just naturally to zero for a while. So I think something happened, and then it sort of just come back. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think TikTok's algorithm is still a bit of a mystery to me as well. We'll have one video get 1,000 and then the next video get 10.
Yeah. I've had literally one 6,000, and the very next day I post a video, same time, all the other metrics would be the same, and it got to like three.
Yeah, madness, madness.
No idea, no idea.
But organic growth is the best kind. So if you've built that audience organically, that's amazing.
Yeah, hopefully it's word of mouth, because I actually do think that is going to bring in the people who actually want to listen to the stuff you make.
Definitely. So you've got 4 different podcasts. I want to dive into some of the rest of them a little bit later on. But as Ninja News Japan is your main one, maybe we could touch base on that to begin with. What kind of production goes into making a news podcast?
So over the course of the week, at my job, I actually monitor the news regularly anyways. And I've actually done this. So when I mentioned video games journalism, I every week or every month would write a thing called the News Roundup. And it was just links to articles and then little jokes or explanations as to what they was talking about. So you could actually just read this one thing and get like a week's worth of news. That was kind of the concept. And so I've always enjoyed that. It's almost like curating and compressing the current events of the day, trying to make it as digestible as possible. So it'd be like Twitter, only I chose it. So Ninja News Japan, over the course of the week, I just sort of mark off any news stories I find interesting. I'll pick probably about 7, I think, basically one a day, 7 stories of the week that are pretty good. I'll try to do some follow-up research on them. And so I want to get multiple news sources, because it's not like I'm held to any standard, but I do want the stuff I say to be relatively true. So I try to get, if 2-3 sources say the same thing, I still don't know if it's true, but it's more likely to be true. If I get really disparate takes on the same issue, I will often make that the story. It's like, we have actually no idea what's going on because these guys said this and these guys said that. And that sometimes I would say is more interesting. And then because it's Japan, there's a lot of like culture that goes into it. So I want to explain the culture that might be alien to people who are living in the West.
Okay. So do you write a full script for each episode then?
I write, I would say everything's bullet pointed. I write full sentences of the news and then leave in, and then, but it's not scripted. I think it sounds better. So I'll have a notebook and it has points, and if you watch the video, you'll actually see me hold it up and check that if I do a quote, I'm reading the quote. If I'm talking, you can see the notebook goes away and I just talk. So you can almost tell when I'm saying something that's factually accurate and when I'm sort of using color commentary, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if you've got sort of a smooth flow of conversation or of talking, it works so much better than having a robotic script that you're kind of reading from.
Yeah, you can tell when people are reading too, and it doesn't sound as natural, and it takes away, because also if you don't script fully, you're allowing yourself to go off on tangents, which often in the moment can be the best part. So there's an idea actually came to your head while you were speaking, and that idea then becomes like a 5-minute bit, and then you're like, oh wow, that was really good. I wouldn't have written that down. I have talked through stuff and changed my opinion from the beginning to the end of the segment.
Oh, really? That's
like, I think this is good. And then talk about it. And I'm like, well, wait a second. And then I'll talk about it a little more. And I go, actually, I think I disagree with me from 5 minutes ago now, because that's the thought process and people, especially on the internet, they don't want to accept it. There's a right and a wrong. But I think if you talk through an issue, you're thinking about the different perspectives. If you think about all the different perspectives, you will now have a variety of ideas. And then you can say, well, maybe I wasn't wrong, but I wasn't 100% right either. And then you can sort of decide, oh, okay, maybe I should think about this more, look into it more. Or now I know what to look at. That actually might be the more important bit.
So you do the initial research yourself, you follow that all up, find your sort of bullet points to talk about, you talk through it and record that, and then you do all the distribution yourself as well?
Yep. Before we talked, I was actually just finishing off the edit of this Thursday's podcast. So I edit it, and then I upload it, and it goes up to all the places you're supposed to put it. So it's like YouTube and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and everything.
And you upload that manually?
So it's 100% one person. Yeah, but I mean, that's I think it's just a nature thing. Like, I get bored so easily. And I wanted to learn I always, kind of what I said at the beginning, I want to learn everything. I want to know how to do everything that needs to be done. So the only way to really learn that properly is to do it yourself. And I really enjoy that. So I didn't want to even put my podcast on another service. So I bought a domain, I bought web space, and I host it from there myself. I know it's like they say in a lot of the contracts when you use a hosting service, it's like they can access, they can use your stuff. I was like, nope. Now I know that's very unlikely to happen, but if it did, I'm like, well, no, that's not right. It's not fair. It's mine. So I want full control over it.
You're very brave.
I don't know. I think it's kind of, I've read a lot of stories from musicians and authors and stuff, and they were like, the instant you give up control of your thing that you're making, it's just gone. Like someone will take it, they will take advantage of it if it's any good. So like Charles Bukowski, the American poet, he never made any money. And then like there's a dozen stories of singers who made songs and just never saw a penny from the songs. And, it's just wrong. So yeah, the one thing I've learned, and it's I have no contracts with anybody, but if ever I was to enter into one, 100% the first thing would be like full creative control of your own product. And you get to keep it in perpetuity. Like they don't get to like 10 years from now, it's ours. It's like, no, man, that's not right.
Yeah, so true. And as you say, you have to be ready for that before you kind of blow up, because by the time you blow up.
Yeah. So like if you go viral, today, are you ready for next week? And that should be, because I don't expect to go viral. I don't think my content is that exhilarating to young people, which would be the viral group, but you don't know. Maybe they want an old man saying weird stuff on the internet.
So to move to some of your other shows, I saw you do one on Daily Affirmations.
Oh, Daily Affirmations is a joke. So it's really just one-liners. Basically I came up with one-line jokes. I made about 30 or 40 at the beginning. And the idea was these were just like one-off lines. I couldn't make a podcast that was just one lines, could I? And then I was like, no, I can. Just you have to make it kind of weird and obscure. So you would listen to it. It's got some very new agey music. It's got about 10 seconds. It's just a line like, you don't have to worry about Sasquatches unless you're at sea. Something like that, like just really random, but it's actually really, it never stops. So it's a project that I do, and then I won't touch it for a year, and then I'll add 10 more or something like that. So there's about 40 or 50 right now. And then like 5 months from now, I'll add in like 10 more, because I just write down in a notebook every idea. Very weirdly, it's always getting downloads.
Oh, really?
So like my two big ones, they will get downloads for the first 2-3 days. They're big. So release day, whatever amount of downloads, that's really normal. And then it kind of trails off. This one is just like a little bit all the time. So there's someone out there either just listening to it over and over again, or there's like every day someone finds it and listens. I do feel a little bad because someone out there wants a real affirmation and I'm not.
Oh, that makes sense. I did think after listening to it and then seeing you here that something didn't quite match up. Watched earlier today was there was a pickle who thought he was very clever, and then he got eaten. So don't be a pickle. Do 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 do.
Yep, there you go. Yeah, that's it. And so that hopefully you can think about that for the rest of the day.
Yeah, very good. So one of your other little side project podcasts is a Choose Your Own Adventure. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah,
I've never heard anything like that before. Tell me about how that came into creation.
So I really enjoyed Choose Your Own Adventures when I was a kid. And it's a lot of it leans towards more to comedic stuff. And I was like, well, a Choose Your Own Adventure for adults that's comedic. I could write it, and I probably have to self-publish it. I'm not famous. I don't have a book contract with anybody, which is fine to try. But then again, is it going to get noticed? But I already have this sort of core audience who are listening to my podcast, so they might like it. So you had to write it. So it was the weird thing about, you don't think about a Choose Your Own Adventure. If you write it like really properly, you're writing 2 books.
Yeah.
Because you're going to write the book, and then you're going to write all these offshoots, which is the same amount of content. And then you start thinking about like, the people will never see all the content. Like no one's going to listen to every single episode, which is a weird thing, because there's episodes you put tons of work into, no one heard it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's the nature of the beast. So because I loved them when I was a kid, I had a really goofy idea. I thought, okay, I'll write that. I wrote it. And then I was like, I have this infrastructure basically. So I'll put it on there. And I was like, has anyone done this before? Just like you said. And I looked, I didn't see it. I saw people doing D&D, and like playing D&D live on podcasts is really popular. And I've seen people do things similar to it, but the user is still passive. And I was like, well, can I make the user active? So in the episode, you would listen to the first episode and it would say, now go to episode 2 or episode 3, depending on the choices you make, and off you go. And it had a really good initial response. It was probably, like, again, if you looked at charts, probably one of the most successful things I've done so far. So I'm in plans to make another one, but I mean, it's again, writing a book is a 2-year-long process in itself. You can't just bust it out because I have a full-time job. So
it was a whole book that you wrote in order to create that?
Yeah, and I did a really stupid thing. I basically wrote 2 books because I decided the first decision should be meaningful. So in Choose Your Own Adventures, there's really a line, and then if you go off, you die. And I was like, no, I want the decisions to be impactful and meaningful. So I wrote tree branches. So there's a best ending, but there are other full long endings, and it's a whole other story. So I had, the first one is either you answer the phone or answer the door. And those are 2 different stories.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And then the meta part was, if you choose one, you end up, there's a way you could end up joining a cult and giving up on everything. And then if you choose the second, you could actually meet yourself from the other storyline and have sex with yourself. Now you have to make a lot of the right choices to do that, but it is possible that you could have sex with yourself in that story.
That's amazing. That's something for your listeners to aim for.
Yes, everyone should try for that one. Or you can meet a leprechaun and end up living with a leprechaun.
So did you, were you able to bring some of your viewers from your other shows to your new shows?
Oh, yeah.
How did you do that?
The initial
promotion?
So I advertised it on all my shows. So on CMcB and Ninja News Japan, I did a full month-long push. I decided I should really try actual promotion. So I went on sort of some friends podcasts and stuff, and I pushed it there. I wrote a press release, which I'd never done before, and I sent it out knowing that no one was really going to pick it up. But I was like, again, one place does, who knows? So I sent that out, and I used a service that's supposed to send it to news agencies. I was like, news agencies don't want to know about some weird little podcast out in the world. But again, who knows? Numbers in podcasting is so difficult to actually suss out. So if you go, the lowest number would have been somewhere, again, 8 to 1,000. But the highest number, if you went by the website numbers, which again, probably a lot of bots, would be 18,000. But that gives you a range of 800 to 18,000 people have seen this. I have no idea. But again, that's not why I'm doing it. So it's okay.
Yeah, as you say, that spread is huge to know whereabouts.
It's so silly. It's so silly that we can't figure out. But again, that's technology beyond me, so I can't complain. I'm not writing the scripts or anything.
So how did you promote them in your own shows? Did you do that sort of in the middle of a news show, or did you put it at the end, or how did that work?
Yeah. So CMcB, I just made it a segment. I said, look, I've done this project. I explained the project kind of like I just did with you. I just said, like, I've made a thing. I believe it's the first one. I think I may have done the first one of something, which is really cool in itself. If you like what I've been doing on this show, you like this kind of humor, you'll probably like it. So please give it a try. And then on Ninja News Japan, it doesn't really fit format wise, but again, I was like, I'm the author of this show. I'm the author of this Choose Your Own Adventure. I just stuck that at the end though, because it didn't really fit within the format. But in CMcB, I actually explained the whole process. I took like a 10-minute segment and said, like, this is how long it took to write. Here are some of the options. Here were some of the struggles I went through writing it. Because again, I'd never written a Choose Your Own Adventure before. How do you keep track of all the options? I had to teach myself how to do that. And again, sort of the mistakes I made. And the second story, I believe, is a lot stronger than the first story. But of course it is, because that's the part I already had practice. I started writing. So. And then recording, I think, again, gets stronger as it goes on. So the first couple episodes, voice is a little weak because I'm reading from a script now, which again, in these kind of formats, I'm not actually doing. So that was all interesting. I now I feel like, I should have done more sound design and more noises and stuff. But again, that's maybe kind of beyond me, to be honest.
Well, that's it. It would be nice to add some sound effects and all that kind of thing, but then that's a whole nother layer of stuff to learn. Yeah, I think.
Well, I was thinking of just doing it with my mouth. Well, because if it's going to be low budget, go all the way low budget. So he opened the door and then just make the door sound with your mouth would be funny. But I also was thinking that maybe that would get exhausting over, let's say, 15, 20, 30 episodes. So I was really torn on that one. I'd have to get maybe some other people's opinions.
It's a great idea as a way to get the listeners involved with the story, because that's something that I think's a really important thing to do and can get you so much more traction, is if your viewers can feel like they're involved with your podcast in some way.
Yeah.
But it's often so hard to actually achieve that, where with Choose Your Own Adventure, it's ingrained in there.
It's actually part of the process. Yeah. And actually, yes, as far as promoting, very specific though, on Reddit, there's a subreddit called audio drama. So
Okay.
if you're writing some sort of audio drama, they're very welcoming there. And I was like, I'm not 100% sure this fits. It's audio. Don't know if drama would be the right word, but it is a story. And so they were like, yeah, post it. I mean, again, this is just what it's for. People can listen or not. It's up to them. But I think I got a lot of traction from there as well. And they were really, really positive about it.
Yeah, Reddit's been a great tool for me to find guests for this show. So to
Yeah.
move to a different subject, you live in Japan. You've lived there for the last 20 years, I think. How did you end up in
I
Japan?
came in 2001. So yeah. Oh, I, since the age of 12, did judo.
Okay.
And so in university, I got very, very serious and I tried to go to the Canadian Nationals. I failed. It's a very sad story. It's actually quite funny. So if you think about like Bloodsport or any of these 80s action movies in the tournament, what happens is the hero gets hurt and then he like, oh, I'll just bandage that and go back and win with like a special move. So I had broken 2 fingers and it was like a very important part of the match. And so I was like, I'm tape it up because I'm a man and I've watched a lot of movies, maybe too many. And then I went back in and just immediately got my ass kicked because you can't do it. You can't fight with only one hand. That's just ridiculous. So then I went home and cried. But it is literally the opposite of what happens in an action movie is real life. I wasn't going to be any sort of world champion. I probably didn't have those skills anyways, but I did still have that sort of passion for doing it. So then I went around Europe for a bit and I lived in Korea for a year. And then I was like, well, I want to finish off. I'll come to Japan. I'll live in Japan. No real plan. I'll live here for 2-3 years. I'll teach English and I'll bum around, maybe go to different parts of the country. And then go back to Canada and start a job or maybe even just keep traveling. I didn't know. And then I've just found I had a really nice lifestyle. I had a job I liked. I met my wife and it was like 3-4 years later. Yeah, we're married. And it's like, oh, okay, I live here now. This is just my life. So that's how I ended up in Japan. Yeah. It wasn't specifically, I just wanted to do a couple of years of judo and then maybe go somewhere else.
So you were there for a long time before you started deciding to podcast about Japanese culture and news then?
Yeah, I think it was going to bleed in regardless. When I was doing the original podcast, I started doing just singular news stories because I'm reading the news anyways. And, oh, this is a really weird story or this is a really funny story. So I just put it in that podcast as a segment and then it grew. And I was like, oh, I should just make this its own podcast. And that's when I started maybe overwhelming myself because it's a lot. Like if you do one podcast, that's something, but 2, 3, 4, 5, like, but every time I want to do something, I'm like, oh, I want to do the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So now CMcB has become the test stage or the experimental area for ideas. Because I once a month for the last maybe 15 months, I've been reading a free Amazon book about some scientists who got picked up and placed on a prehistoric planet. And it's like women on a planet where there's never been women before. But I ended up really enjoying the story. And I was like, oh, I could do a podcast where I just read books and make fun of them. And I was like, oh, but actually, yeah, it's too much. So I was like, okay, that fits in here. We'll do one book and then I can just quit. So CMcB has become just where I try stuff. Okay. And some of it works, some of it doesn't, but it's good to have a place where you can just play.
It's kind of your testing ground then.
Yeah, so I'll do something. I can do it for a couple of weeks or 3 or 4 episodes and be like, yeah, that was good, but I'm not going to keep going. Or if it becomes so the Ninja News Japan, I enjoyed this. Other people enjoyed that. I got good feedback on it. Okay, it grew into its own thing. And Daily Affirmations Weekly, I did a couple one-liner jokes. I think I was doing it after the credits. So like if anyone listened to the whole credits, they would get a joke. And that was like people actually who did listen really liked those. I was like, oh, I'll create a really weird, silly format for those and do those.
So you said you made your own website for Ninja News Japan.
Yeah.
How did you make that yourself?
Yeah. I before I moved to Japan, I spent a year working at a computer company. So I did like HTML and CSS and PHP and all those kind of things. So the database stuff is pretty familiar to me. So I have no problem going in and messing around with code. HTML is actually quite easy, but now I don't even do it. Because WordPress is pre-installed in almost everything, so I just use WordPress.
Okay.
Like I don't even write the code anymore because way smarter people have already made it, and they've made it so easy.
That makes sense that you've got that tech background, so that's probably made it a bit easier for you to catch on to how to do a lot of the podcasting production.
Yeah, it's there's no one really explaining anything to you is if you do it by yourself, and that's maybe the first problem. So I go on the podcast subreddit, and when people ask technical questions, I do try to help them, but you get so many voices dumping on them. I was like, okay, I don't know if it's worthwhile or not, but I do like to help people. So I just like, yeah, I kind of go through there every couple of days and just see what's going on.
Oh, that's nice. So again, Reddit's just such a good source to be able to reach out to other people and get that information.
Anytime you make something, like if I did a podcast on some Marvel stuff, so I just stuck it in the Marvel subreddit, and maybe it gets traction, maybe it doesn't, but at least those are the people who would be interested. That's the appeal of Reddit, is like, if I put it in the right place, those people are inherently interested in what I've made.
Mm-hmm.
So they might not like the whole podcast, but they might like that episode. And I was like, okay, well, that's worth it. If they really glob onto one episode, maybe they'll stick around, maybe not, but they get one episode that's really good. That's great.
Yeah, it's a perfect place that has your target audience just immediately there and ready for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So amazing. And I guess where you are creating them all yourself, you're hosting them all yourself, your costs must be pretty much zero.
Uh, Hosting costs, I do it in yen, so conversion. So it's the American, probably like $100 every 2 years.
Yeah.
That was the cost. And so I have to pay that every few years if I want to keep going. And then cost wise, I was using a really bad microphone. And so I switched to this one, which was about 7,000, so about $70 American. And then the camera is about $70 American. So I always had an idea that you shouldn't go over $100 for this kind of stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can find a way to get a good quality thing. So this microphone I actually think is quite good. Again, didn't break the bank, didn't pay $2, $3, $4, $500 for it. The webcam, again, I was like, I want a good one, but I don't need it to be like 4K definition. No one needs to see my face like that. They do want to see my dog in the background though. The dog is all anyone. Half the time I do stuff on Twitch, all they want to do is stop playing the game, just show us the dog.
And so how did you choose that microphone and that camera? Because as you say, you put a question out there and you get bombarded with 100 different options that range from $10 to $1,000.
Yeah, so I think you have to set a reasonable price range, and I think $100 for technical stuff is fair.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you're going to go with like a microphone or a webcam, you should be looking at around $100. It's a lot for some people, but it's how long are you going to use it? Because again, the microphone I had, it was a $30 microphone. It was actually made for, it's like a classic stage microphone. But when I had a thing, I plugged into it and plugged that into the computer. It had a buzz. This is a USB one. This is the HyperX Solocast. It's I think it's between $60 and $70 American. It's designed for streamers or something like that. It's a computer company that makes it, but it's designed to be a compressor microphone that goes into USB. So it's made for the computer. So that immediate quality improvement when I did that. Mm-hmm. So I went on Amazon. I looked up, of course, you do go on the internet and you do like 10 best microphones for podcasting. But then I cross-referenced that with the most popular microphones on Amazon that had the best reviews. And that's how I ended up with this one. And $60 was really nice price point for me. This camera is the Logitech C90 something. It's actually, if you look up streaming or podcasting, it's going to come up. It's one of the first Logitech ones that comes up. It's really popular. I think they have a new version this year, but it is, again, I don't have to do any adjustments with it. It just plugged right into USB. It's made for a computer. So that was something to think. If you're going to go out and do mobile stuff, because you can take a laptop and go somewhere else. You got to take into account, I'm in a room. It's very small, so there's not a lot of echo. That was important. Noise gate, stuff like that is important. They're going to pick up background sounds. Since I wanted to be able to do it at my desk where I am now, I got the computer, the arm. I'm going to move this to make a really awful sound, but I have the arm that I can move just up and down, and that was $30. And so in total, the mic arm was $100, which is great. The mic setup, but it means I can move it out of the way and I don't have to really worry about it, which is really nice.
Oh, that's super nice. So just before we wrap up, I always like to ask some top 3 tips for anyone who's looking to start a podcast or looking to get in the podcasting world.
It's not gonna be 3, but one of my tips is always gonna be really long anyways. People are always looking to do it quickly. So there's a stat that you read. It's like most podcasts don't get past episode 6. So they do the first 3 or 4. No one listens to them. They give up. That's not how it works. Podcasting is very much a long-term endeavor. So in total, over 3 podcasts that have kind of overlapped, where I'm talking like 8-9 years, most of the podcasts you've heard of or like, they're probably more than 10 years old. And it takes a really long time. And a lot of the ones that are popular now are famous people coming in and making a podcast. So for you as a non-known entity, you're going to be podcasting to small groups, which can be really discouraging. But a lot of times, again, on these podcast subreddit, people are like, well, I only have like 100 listens or 100 people or whatever. And they get really down on it. And I'm like, well, if you really think about it, 20 people in your living room, it's massive, and they're listening to you. If you go to a comedy club, let's say that's 100 people for a small to medium-sized comedy club, and they're all listening to you. And as you grow, like 150 people is a lot of people, and they're coming back for exclusively to listen to your voice for 20, 30 minutes. That's significant. And so people diminish because you look at YouTube, 1 million views, or you look at a Joe Rogan's podcast, it's 3 million downloads or whatever, 3 million subscribers. But that's irrelevant. It's how many people actually want to listen to what you have to say? And so when Ninja News Japan hit like 500, 800, I'm like, how big a room is that to fit 800 people? Well, that's a theater. Like that's a proper theater that's full. And that's really impressive if I could fill up a theater. And then if it keeps growing, great, I'll go to my small stadium. And then I don't have to think about it anymore, because then I'll be making real money. But that's the one, is you got to do it because you enjoy it. So I obviously enjoy the creative process and the technical process. But if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to keep doing it. If you're doing it to make money, money comes along so much later for something like that, unless you really strike at the right time, at the right moment. So you got to do it because you enjoy it. And then a lot of people come in like, when can I monetize? It's like, we're talking about the internet. Like you could have one of the best podcasts with the best voices in the world, and maybe just everyone misses it. It might just be bad luck. And people don't think about it that way. Like maybe I am making one of the best podcasts in the world, but it's the internet. How much stuff is there to wade through, and how many podcasts are released every single day? So you can't compare yourself to other people. And it's the grind mentality, but I want to look at it. I don't like calling it grind because that's really negative sounding. It's like, what achievement, what accomplishment, what milestone have I made next? So when I got to 100 people who were listening clearly every week, I'm like, okay, imagine 100 people sitting in front of you. And that's a lot of people. And that makes it a lot easier to like, okay, it's not only 100, it's like, I've done 100. So that's sort of maybe 2 in 1. Well, don't do it for money. Do it because you enjoy it. Don't compare. Oh, that's 3. Don't do it. Don't compare yourself to other big numbers, because and then the ones you're listening to are probably massive. Like you listen to Conan O'Brien, he's got 3 million. He had 3 million because they all came from TV. That's not fair. You're not competing with him.
I mean, that's such a good point. I think if you can build 100 people, especially that are coming back to you week on, week out,
every week. Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. That is, as you say, How often do you get the opportunity to speak to 100 people? Unless you're a lecturer or you're probably never.
And they're obligated to be there. If you're a lecturer and they're students, they have to be there. CMcB is like 100, 200 people, and Ninja News Japan is way bigger. It's 800 people, but like that doesn't bother me. I'm like, no, this is 100 people love this content. 800 people come back every single week for this. That's crazy to me. So it's great. And then I sell t-shirts, but I made like $30 over 5 years. But, I got 10 people in the world wearing my t-shirt. That's kind of cool.
Amazing. Well, before we go, if you let our listeners know where they can find your shows and your t-shirts, that would be great.
If you go to chunkmcbeefchest.com, that actually has links to everything. ninjanewsjapan.com, those are the 2 websites. They have all the links. There's like TikTok links and YouTube links all there. But on YouTube, you can go to at chunkmcbeefchest, because you use the @ symbol now. And that'll be both podcasts just in one feed. But there's 2 playlists. So if you want to only listen to one, you can listen to one. See, I'm already diminishing. Like if you don't want to listen to something, you don't have to. And then I do have another thing. It's called Chunk My Beef Chest Games. and that is a separate YouTube feed, but that is Twitch stuff. So like when I play video games, I record on Twitch. I
Okay,
like
and
video
just quickly,
games.
we're running up on time here, but where did
Yep.
Chunk McBeef chest come from?
That's it's a story. There's a show called Mystery Science Theater 3000, and every time the hero came on in this singular movie, they have a thing where they make fun of movies. Um, every time he came on, they made a different joke name for him, like beef slab chest and da 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 da. And so it was that da 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 was after 50 times was incredibly funny, no matter what they said. Rock slab hard, and so it just was a really goofy name, and I made that my gamer name. Chunk Me Beef Chest was a play on that joke because it was an original name, but it came from that pattern. And then it became my gamer tag. And then I was like, well, I'm going to make a new one. I'll make it Chunk Me Beef Chest. But then CMcB was shorter. That's actually the reason. So yeah, that just comes from an old TV show that used to make fun of movies, Mystery Science Theater 3000. And that definitely shows the kind of humor I'm into if you know what I'm talking about.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Peter.
Yeah, no problem. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Podcast for Podcasters podcast. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have any suggestions for us, you can contact me at charlielatham5@gmail.com. That's charlielatham5@gmail.com. Before we go, I'd like to thank the sponsor of our show, Podcast Man. Podcast Man takes the pain out of podcasting production so you can spend more time meeting guests, having interesting conversations, and doing what you love. Find out more at podcastman.co.uk. Have a great day, everyone.